What's up everyone, it's Sinistry, and today we need to talk about The Sims 4 going free to play. Recently, EA announced that Sims 4 will be free to play starting in October, and a lot of people have been speculating what this means for Sims 5, and specifically what it means for its monetization. Personally, I think that the announcement of Sims 4 going free to play signals kind of the end of Sims 4, and I think that Sims 5 will be announced within the next year or so. So now is a good time to discuss what monetization could look like for this new entry, and I have 4 different scenarios that I think are pretty likely, which we'll run through today. If you like this kind of content, make sure you like and subscribe so I know I should continue creating more Sims content, but with that being said, let's jump into option 1. Option 1 has a free-to-play base game, but will have paid DLC. With this option, you would get Sims 5 free from day 1, but you would pay for any DLC down the line. I think DLC would probably still come in the same 4 styles. You'd get the expansion packs, game packs, stuff packs, and kits. Now, there are a few reasons why EA would choose this option. First of all, it could get more people interested in Sims from the very get-go. Secondly, they could get away with a smaller scope for the game at launch, whereas with Sims 4, they did get a lot of backlash for leaving out some core features. Also, it could be better publicity for them if they, put out a million different packs down the line, but they don't charge for the base game. After all, people could then choose to pick up the game and then just kind of tailor their own experience for The Sims however they want by purchasing the packs that are interesting to them. Pros for the players would be that you can get the base game for free, so even if you don't want any DLC, you can still have the game. And also, it's possible that it could be a little less expensive for people, especially if you don't buy any of the DLC. It would obviously be free, though they could kind of tweak the pricing of the DLCs, so it would be a bit of a toss-up. Now, if I had to kind of rate how likely I think this would be, I would only give this a 4 out of 10. It's one of the safest options EA has overall in terms of business decisions and a way to kind of change up the monetization for The Sims. But it does make them less money initially, and I don't know if they would be okay with that. They would really have to bank on getting a much larger audience who would be willing to purchase their DLC. And honestly, EA is not a very generous company, so I don't necessarily know they'd be willing to take a risk just for the better publicity. Now, our second option is kind of totally different. You would actually pay a subscription fee for all content of The Sims. Now, let me explain. You would first off subscribe to the base game for The Sims, and then from then on, there would be continual updates by the Sims team, but you wouldn't have to pay anymore for DLC. So basically, you'd just get free DLC. It's, I guess, free because you'd be paying the subscription service. Now, this subscription could be either monthly or annual, and if it was monthly, I would see it being probably around $10 to $15 a month, and if it were annual, probably around $100 to $150, depending on what the monthly tier would be. Now, there are again a few reasons why EA would choose this option instead, the first of which being that they know they have a lot of casual Sims players who play every so often, but not all the time. By charging them a subscription fee, they are continuing to get money out of them even if they don't think about the game for 6 months and they forget that they're paying the subscription. And if they forced people to buy an annual subscription, I don't think they would do that, but if they did, they would have that money in the bank, so they would be able to do whatever they want with it. Also, you have to consider that sometimes DLC flops. Sometimes they are not very good, and a lot of players choose to not buy some of the more niche DLC, such as the Star Wars pack. But if EA does this kind of subscribe to everything rollout, then they can guarantee that they are getting money on a monthly basis, and the people who maybe wouldn't have spent as much on the game would now be spending even more. They could also roll out content on a slow and steady basis to keep people continually engaged, whereas with the DLC drops, people tend to be engaged for a short period of time and then go back to forgetting about the game. And after all, more engagement means more discussion about The Sims, which means more players potentially coming over to Sims 5, which is something that EA would of course want. Now, the pros for players. First of all, if you play Sims on a regular basis, like all the time, it's the only game that you play, then this could potentially be a good deal for you and you would get probably lots of new content. And I could see an option where you're able to pause or cancel your subscription if you decide that you don't have enough time to play The Sims or you're not really interested in it. But of course, there are a lot more cons than there are pros for The Sims players with this kind of option. First of all, if you are a casual simmer, gamer, you only pick up the game every so often, you rarely buy DLC, you would probably pay a lot more for this option. Also, EA can take their sweet time drip feeding content if they want because they know they have people on subscriptions, and this is especially true if annual were the only option. Definitely the biggest issue is that you would basically be renting your copy of The Sims, so if you decided you weren't going to pay EA anymore for access to The Sims via the subscription, you wouldn't be able to access it at all. And let's be honest, that would really suck for so many different reasons, but that would basically mean that you would have to pay continually for probably years in order to access this content. And as you can imagine, this would probably make them a crap ton of money, but I really don't know if this would go back into the, employees' benefits or into better gameplay or anything like that. I would be very skeptical because EA is a very greedy company, to be completely honest, and I would not be surprised if this would kind of line the pockets of the executives. Now, all of that being said, I don't know that I necessarily think this is going to happen. I would give it a 5 out of 10 likelihood. I did give it a higher likelihood than the free-to-play option because I actually think that EA is such a scummy company that they would totally do this kind of thing. And since things like loot boxes and season passes don't really work for a game like The Sims, what are they going to do to kind of grind out those last few pennies from all of their, kids and teens and young adults who play this game? Well, to answer my question, we have option 3, which is a subscription to the base game and paid DLC. Yeah, this is somehow even worse than my last option. Basically, it's the same in that you would have to pay a subscription to access the base game, but you would actually have to pay separately for DLC. The DLC would actually be a one-time purchase, so I don't necessarily think they would have you paying, tons and tons of subscriptions, but I think that they would potentially have you pay for DLC on top of the subscription. I think it's pretty obvious why EA would do this. It would sell. People would buy the content. If they already have the subscription, they're a lot more likely to buy DLC because they know that they need to justify having the subscription. And this would make it so EA would not have to continually put out free content. They could basically put out any free content and it would be a blessing. And you bet that a majority of the content would be paid. A vast majority. I mean, we're talking like they would have Sims 4 base game as the subscription, and then you would have to pay for all of the DLC, just like with Sims 4. Except worse because you have to pay for the game every month. I tried to think if there were any pros for players, and genuinely there were none. Not even for people who are hardcore simmers who play every single day. Literally no pro here. The cons are pretty obvious again. EA would be taking more money, and also you would not have access to the DLC content that you purchased if you don't pay the subscription to the base game. And also, the base game on its own would probably be worthless. Let's be completely honest here, they shipped out Sims 4 base game with no second thoughts. Do you really think that they would not do the same exact thing for Sims 5 and then charge people a monthly subscription? And then charge people for DLC. I put the likelihood for this at 5 out of 10 as well, just like the last option, because I really think it's a 50-50 toss-up. If they were ever to do a subscription service, would they actually charge people for DLC? But if they're already gonna go the subscription service route, which I don't know that they will, but they could, if they did, I would kind of be surprised if they didn't also charge for DLC. It's just a very EA thing to do, and it's something that would make a ton of people really upset, so obviously it's the option they would go with. Now the fourth option is, in my opinion, the best one. It's just doing the game the way that they did Sims 4. You pay for the base, you pay for DLC, and we're good to go. Honestly, I think EA would definitely do this because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. People are already used to this whole formula of you buy the game and then you buy the DLC. So why change it up and confuse people or frustrate people? They already have their wallets in their hands ready for Sims 5. Just take their money. Also, I do think that they would consider charging more for this game and for DLC, and they know that people would pay for it. Like, if I'm being completely honest, I fully expect that Sims 5 is going to be at least $70, if not $80, maybe even $90. I say this because, once again, EA is greedy, but also because games haven't really kept up with inflation, and I think companies are starting to realize that they have to charge more. That's a whole topic for another video, but I do think that EA could could potentially be going that route. Now, of course, there are a few pros to this option, with the biggest one being it's what everyone knows and comes to expect, so we wouldn't really have a reason to get upset even if the price hiked a little bit. Especially if they were to give us more content in the base game, which I could see as a possibility to justify a larger price tag. Now, obviously, there are a few cons. First of all, the amount of content that is in DLC versus in base game in Sims 4 is pretty egregious. Like, obviously, I expect that expansion packs are going to put in a ton of new content, but like, why is weather its own pack? Why is having a toddler its own pack? These are things that Simmers have been very confused about for many years, so I mean, I would really expect the same thing to happen in Sims 5. Also, kits would probably return, and they're pretty hateful. Like, I feel personally attacked every time I see a kit on my screen. Also, I think EA would definitely find a way to increase the amount of money they bring in from The Sims and not put it to any good use. However, all that being said, I think the likelihood that EA would just continue the same formula of buy the game and then buy the DLC is probably a 9 out of 10. Now, I have a few final thoughts to kind of wrap everything up and explain why I kind of feel this way and why I don't think we need to be concerned right now. First of all, I think that we should just kind of contain ourselves until we know a little bit more about what's coming with Sims 5 in the future. Right now, we don't even know when the game is going to be released. We don't even know if it's coming in the next couple of years. I think it will. I think it's going to be announced within the next year, which I'll get to in a second. But I don't think we need to get upset until we actually know what EA is planning for Sims 5. Now, why I think Sims 5 is going to be announced within the next year is because I think Sims 4 going free to play is a last-ditch effort to squeeze people of all of their Sims 4 money before announcing Sims 5. I think that EA knows that there are a lot of people who never got Sims 4 who were huge Sims 3 fans. And I think that they know that there are people who have never really considered Sims because they didn't want to pay $60, and that they might consider it now that it's free to play. And if you think about it, with how minimal the base game of Sims 4 is, it's pretty likely that if you try Sims 4 as free to play, you're gonna buy at least a couple DLC. I really feel like EA is just trying to squeeze Sims 4 for all it is worth, and then they are going to ditch it and they're gonna bring out Sims 5. However, EA has mentioned that they are going to be adding new content for Sims 4 for the foreseeable future. I don't necessarily believe it, but you know, we'll see what comes out over the next few months. Even though I don't want to get upset about Sims 5 before we even know what the game is, I do think that we should all be wary of EA because they have gone down very dark paths with Sims and with other games in the past. I don't think EA is a good company. I think EA is honestly one of the worst AAAs that I can think of, just because of how they choose to monetize everything and how they really don't prioritize players. But that was everything I had to say about Sims 4 going free to play. And as a final note, I wanted to throw in here, if you already own Sims 4 and you purchased it, then you actually can get a free kit called the Desert Luxe kit. Yes, it is just a kit, and yes, I did say I was absolutely disgusted by kits, and I still am. But I've owned Sims 4 for many years at this point. I feel like at least this was something. They didn't have to give us anything. They chose to give us something. I'm grateful for it. But anyway, what do you think about Sims 4 going free to play? And do you think that Sims 5 is going to be released anytime soon? Do you think it's going to be monetized any specific way? Let me know in the comments down below. And make sure to like and subscribe if you like Sims content. I'm going to be putting up so much more Sims content in the near future. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.